The draft National Water Resources Strategy was published on 29 July this year and is open for comment for 90 days. We'll unpack some of those points today with the Director of Communications from the Department of Water Affairs, Sputnik Ratau, as our special guest. Don't go away, we will be right back. If you've just joined us, then welcome to the Water Hour hosted with the South African Water Chamber. I'm Brigetti Limbanda from Cape Town in South Africa, and this live stream is brought to you by BeLive Media and the South African Water Chamber. Now, this is an audience-centric show, and we are monitoring the comments, so we welcome you to post a comment or a question to our panelists today. And so, our panelists comprises of the South African Water Chamber, Dr. Anthony Turton, who will hopefully be able to join us a little bit later, Fred Platt and Benoit Roy, as well as a very special guest, the Communications Director at the Department of Water Affairs, Sputnik Ratau. And so without any further ado, let's welcome gentlemen. Great to have you in the studio with us, and so glad that you could join us, Sputnik. Hearty warm welcome to you. As always, we want to just first give you a very brief overview of what the South African Water Chamber is about. So, Fred, if you can just briefly tell us what is the purpose of the South African Water Chamber and who does it serve?
Thank you, Brigetti. Good afternoon to the listeners and viewers. The South African Water Chamber was born out of an understanding that water is the fundamental economic enabler. Without it, there can be no economic growth and there can be no dignity. We often see water as only the responsibility of government, but we all know that if we are to address the water problem, and I think that it becomes a water opportunity, then at the end of the day, we as business need to reach out, organize ourselves as government has had to do, and take hands with government in an effort to turn what is a major problem into an opportunity to provide that economic enabler to enable dignity, but at the same time, all the other benefits that come with that in terms of job creation, community upliftment, etc., etc. So the South African Water Chamber is an organization that represents organized business that have an interest in the water sector, around taking hands with government and interfacing with government in the execution of the ambitious plans that we have to make our country what it can and what it should be. So we would invite all business to join the South African Chamber, Water Chamber, join our hands and ensure that we can drive not only wonderful plans, but an execution strategy that delivers at the end of the day.
Thanks very much for that introduction to the South African Water Chamber, Fred. Sputnik, if I can ask you for the benefit of our viewers, would you mind giving us just a brief overview of the function of the Department of Water and Sanitation, and who does it serve?
Yes, Bridget, and thank you very much. Good afternoon, colleagues, and good afternoon to the viewers and listeners. The basic responsibility of the Department of Water and Sanitation really is to ensure availability of water for all socio-economic development. I think that's the simplest way of putting it. The department has got a mandate as per the Constitution to ensure that what is entailed in the Bill of Rights and what is strengthened obviously by the mandate coming from the Constitution, that all have got a right to basic services that include access to not just water, but to good drinking water, as well as sanitation that brings dignity to all South Africans. And that is the long and short of it. And within that, obviously, comes the enabling tools that are related to the department and the sector, your legislation, your acts, and all the supporting legislative instruments. But also, and I think this is the most critical part for me, is what is necessary to be able to do that, and that is the availability of not just financial capacity, but it is even more important to have the human capacity to be able to deliver at all levels, not just of government, but including, especially as Fred put it so well, holding hands with partners across all sectors. And business has really, I know, come to the party in a large way, but we know that there is still a huge demand or a huge need for that kind of cooperation and collaboration to actually raise the bar and be able to really deliver. And I would want to leave it there for now, Brigitte. And I think we can always unpack more of the how and so on and so forth as we have that discussion. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Sputnik. I think we all know that without water, there can be no dignity for everyone, regardless of who we are and where we are in the country. So the purpose of the conversation today is to dive a little bit into the National Water Resources Strategy Draft. And this was issued on the 29th of July. Benoit, can I ask you to jump in at this point and perhaps just give us an overview of the importance of this document?
Thanks, Brigitte, and hi to fellow panelists, and always good to have Sputnik on board, and to our viewers. Yes, I think we haven't really made enough rah-rah about the National Water Resource Strategy Draft 3 that's out for public comment. I know there's been a roadshow, and what we're trying to do here is to, I think, try and bolster it a bit more, because to me there's a big difference between 3 and 2, and it's the private sector participation that Sputnik speaks about. But it's nice to have this. We've got the NIP 2050, we've got the master plan and the likes, and I'd really like to know, from Sputnik, what are the big differences between 3 and 2 from his department's perspective, and also what is the plan to actually start implementing all the good stuff, especially where we're going to have heavy private sector participation. What is the broad plan so that we can start getting business ready? And I think we've got quite a lot of multinational companies interested, but who are asking us for, what are the timelines, etc., so that we can start, putting resources, into place. Maybe if I can leave it there.
So Sputnik, if we could maybe start with what are the key differences between the two draft documents, between the previous one and the current one? We're not getting sound from you, Sputnik, so if you could just check your settings there. There we go.
I think you're on mute, Sputnik.
We still can't hear you, and in the meantime, we're going to say welcome to Dr. Anthony Turton to the show. So Sputnik, if you could just try and see if we can get you unmuted there. Welcome, Anthony. Glad you joined us. We've just introduced the show, and the first question that we've asked Sputnik is if you could please explain to us what are the key differences between the previous draft document and the current one. I think he's still trying to unmute. I know it's not always easy when you're not in your office and things are a little bit strange and different, but let's see if Sputnik can unmute on his side. Okay, while Sputnik's trying to find the unmute button there, perhaps if I can ask you, Benoit, why is there such a keen interest in this document, or why should businesses be keenly interested in what this draft document is about?
Well, I think that, the first thing is, we had the master plan published, which really gives the master the overall plan, and we didn't have a plan for a long time. We got a plan, so that was put down, but it doesn't really allude to how we're going to do things. Whereas the resource strategy deals a lot with quite a lot of the specifics of how we're going to deal with things. And like the NIP 2050, there we are, Sputnik, the draft, the private sector participation comes through very loud. There are other themes that come out quite loud, but what I was saying just now, the Sputnik is the private sector participation comes out very loud, and business is keen, but we need to know what the timelines are, and in actual fact, what the what the involvement is going to be. So we're quite interested in that, but also from an overall perspective is, thematically, what from the department's perspective is quite different, or has been revised, is updated from your side between 3 and 2. So I understand it's a living document, and it's revisited every 5 years.
Thanks, Benoit. So over to you, Sputnik.
If I may, and apologies, colleagues, for just being old school again. Just to say, I think for me, and it may not be the definitive difference. And as Benoit correctly puts it, the issue of a public sector, or rather, let me say, private-public participation, has become almost a major issue that is going to drive how we are going to do business in the sector. And in order to assist that process, we are now in a process where between the DG and the CEO of the DBSA, there is work towards installing a private public partnership office, which is going to be located at the DBSA. That is going to drive how we then bring in private sector participation, because from the perspective of the minister, we need to actually do that as a matter of absolute urgency, because the reality of the fact that the fiscus cannot carry not just the backlog, but even the process going forward. I think another issue that is driving the third version here is the approach with regard to climate change and the implications. Particularly because climate change is not just about us as a country, but it affects even the region and obviously everybody else that we actually work with across the board. So the issue of responses to climate change and being able to sustain the services beyond those kinds of impacts then have become something that is quite imperative. The issue of water quality continues to be a thorn in the side of the department, and so on. So a particular emphasis on how to redeem ourselves from the matters that are affecting the water quality, then is, as for me, is almost the third thing that is very, very critical, because we know that especially water quality at source is a matter that is of great concern to us as a department. That for me is what is standing out, but it is not the be all and end all, obviously, because if you think about it, the matter of enhanced participate or rather partnerships would also speak to the matters not just of capacity as in human, but as well as financial. So and how we are able to be, how we can be able to draw on the experiences of the private sector as to how to raise that funding, not just raise it, but also be able to actually spend it accordingly and with great accountability and responsibility. Timelines, I don't have those at the top of my head, unfortunately, colleagues, for now, but I think it's something that will also come out of the consultation process. And once all of that has been finalized, then we can be able to say these are the indications from the sector, and therefore this is what we are seeing, and this is what would be the proposal in terms of timelines. But action is definitely a matter that is being looked at very critically, and we hope that other matters may not actually impact on us and the performance of the department and sector as we drive towards these very critical timelines. Remember that it is not just about responding to the NDP. It is not just about responding to the matters that we are looking at generally as a country, but there is the issue of the SDGs that are actually the major driver of where we need to go. I'll leave it there for now, Bridget and colleagues. Good afternoon.
Thanks very much. Thanks very much, Sputnik. Benoit, does that answer the question? I know that you had two parts to your question.
No, it does. Thank you very much.
Anthony, can I bring you in at this point? What is your sense of the current draft document, and do you have anything that you'd like Sputnik to touch on specifically?
Yes, thank you very much. Good afternoon to you, Sputnik. Nice to always engage with you. The National Water Resource Strategy, just for the viewer, is an important part of the National Water Act. It is designed by law to create a high confidence a baseline of the national water resource. In other words, the current status of water availability, quality, etc., in the different water management areas, and it's designed to act as the single high confidence point of reference when different entities such as municipalities are allocating water to competing users, because your demands for water always exceed the supply of water. So that's really the single purpose of this, and it's also to align with strategy. And I'm very, very pleased to say that we are now starting to see the emergence of a strategy that involves private sector involvement. I sit on the board of a company, an investment company, that is looking specifically at this issue of financing infrastructure, not in South Africa, actually across the board in continental Africa. But this is starting to become more and more relevant. And of course, there is a significant amount of capital that's willing to go into infrastructure projects. But of course, those projects have to be viable, and there have to be a whole lot of governance-related guarantees. So this tells me that the Department of Water and Sanitation is moving in the right direction, and I congratulate them on that. What I would like to just ask Sputnik, if I may please, is what the current National Water Source Strategy has done in terms of the quantification of the resource available. I know that the original resource, I think it was 48 billion cubic meters per annum, if I'm not mistaken, if I remember correctly. And sorry, it used to be 53, and then it was eventually slowly incrementally brought down to 48 because of the whole change in rainfall patterns, etc. So, has this been brought down even further now, or has it stabilized at around about 48 BCM, Sputnik?
Tony, I'm going to disappoint you. I don't have the actual figures at the moment, but it's something that we can be able to bring back to you, Brigitta, so that you can share with the colleagues. But my sense would be, and you're correct, that there was a downward movement in terms of what it is that was being measured and being found. And my sense would be that would still be the reality that we would be going down in terms of actual volume available and so on, including as well the fact that we've seen really seriously high temperatures over time that has resulted in married to the lower rainfall, a huge amount of evaporation that has affected what it is that we can and we would have. We have been fortunate in the last year or two with the kind of rains that we had, especially in the previous rainfall season for the inland provinces, where we have seen quite a great deal of recharge and recovery of the systems. But because of the issues of the inclement weather, because of the issues of evaporation, the issues of overuse and all that, we cannot guarantee that we'll be at the same level over time. We still need, to go on with stringent water use measures.
Thank you very much. If I could just respond to that as well, please. And because the National Water Source Strategy is a dual document, and on the one hand, it's a statement of the actual factual situation of the resource at every 5 years. So at a given moment in time, that's the resource that we have available. But on the other hand, it also refers to the ongoing strategy and changes in policy. And I'm very, very glad to see that there has been adaptation to that strategy of a time, and it's accelerating now. And in particular, given the fact that we've effectively reached the limit of our readily available surface water resources, we're now in that sort of law of diminishing returns kind of phase of our surface water resources, which means that we are starting to transition over to the recycling and the recovery and the desalination option. And I'm very, very pleased to see that this is starting to gain traction in different parts of the country. And in fact, one of the things that I would like to just highlight as a technical area of great strategic importance is the whole thing about aquifer storage and recovery, or active groundwater recharge. And I am aware that in the Western Cape, there is quite a lot of public interest in this matter at the moment. I would also say there's quite a high level of public mistrust in the matter, but nonetheless, this is starting to gain traction in the Western Cape, and I dare say we'll see it in different parts of the country. So I think this show, Water Hour, can play a very important role in dealing with some of those issues, particularly some of those public trust issues, because I think it's extremely important that we bring the public along with us, and it's also very important that the public understands that these processes, A, are necessary, but B, they are also safe. So therefore, we've got to bring about that understanding, in my opinion, anyhow. Back to you, Brigitte.
Thanks very much for that, Anthony. And yes, I want to just pick up on what you said there. It is very important to bring the public along, because without the cooperation of the public, it's very hard to move forward with any plan. So on that, can I ask you, Sputnik, what is the department doing to engage the public to get more cooperation or buy-in from them?
Oh, million dollar question. But it's part of our responsibility with regard to you know, the activities of our colleagues who are in both the public participation section as well as the education and awareness. But that does not leave out communication in its entirety. So, you know, we really have to, from where I'm sitting, my sense is that and maybe I should actually make the example of what is happening in Gqeberha instead, where because of the participation of the private sector and the cooperation that we have built, we were able to actually raise the issue of communication and, you know, inclusivity, or rather the inclusion of the public because of the muscle that the private sector brought in, and as well as the new ideas that are, you know, almost like a little bit outside of what we as government communicators sometimes, you know, just think it is all about. So that helped a lot because it brought some kind of freshness to the manner in which we do not just communicate but also engage with communities. One of the things that is very obvious is that you know, there is always this thing of getting back into your shell if you're looking at, if it seems as if you are either being attacked or you are getting into a negative space, especially within communities. But what we have seen from the point of view of the department particularly is, in fact, when you go out to whichever community or entity that might look like, it may not necessarily be speaking the same language with you, and you actually actively engage with those people. Whether you agree or not would not be the deciding factor, but at least you are able to hear everybody's side, and sometimes even learn new things from whoever it may be. That has helped a lot. But it's still early days. There's still a lot that needs to happen. One of the things that we are trying to work with are what we call, you know, the communication clusters of cabinet, which bring in those departments that are within particular clusters, whether it be the economic sector or social sector and so on and so forth, that can be able to assist a particular department to raise its or rather to amplify its messages and communication efforts. That has helped a lot, but it is definitely not anywhere where we can say this is just so far as we can go.
Thanks very much for that, Sputnik. Benoit, is this, you know, have you seen notable opportunities in what Sputnik says in terms of engagement with the department?
You know, I must say I'm quite realistic and very critical, but also I have to compliment the department's approach over, you know, the last year or so with the new minister. You know, I think the dialogue's important, as Sputnik says. We don't have to always agree, but at least we're talking. And to me, you know, since the door was opened and we started through the PPGI in 2018 with the new administration, at least we're talking. Sometimes we're fighting, sometimes we're agreeing, but there's a strong collaboration. And you know, the roadshow that's been embarked upon at the moment with the National Water Resource Strategy draft, you know, shows that commitment. What stands out to me in it, and I think Sputnik, you referred to DBSA, and I think it's probably the Water Partnership Office, you know, which is the one side to address the three big themes. So non-revenue water, which is driving efficiencies, reuse, and new water through desalination. And I mean, as a chamber, we're agnostic when it comes to technology, but not to philosophy. And those philosophies are, you know, are very clear. There's also, I think, the National Implementation Agency, which is the repackaging of TCTA, etc. And I think, you know, a lot of us were a little bit circumspect at times in this, in centralizing things, because it sounds like command, control, take away. But we understand there's a lack of capacity, 144 WSAs down to 50 WSAs, for example, reducing, and the strategy talks about reducing the amount of water boards In other words, the smaller ones that aren't viable and the likes. And we've seen, AG stuff, but we've also seen that Mtatus will be bundled into Amgani, for example. So some of it is really happening. And I think I just want to touch on another thing is that this started a while back, but what is coming out is, and at the Water Summit in March, it was quite clear, high topic is data and data management, is that there is, and the fifth industrial revolution. And I think what to me strikes a very strong chord here is the digitization of the entire water value chain. And I think because as a water sector, we are always quite conservative, we tend to lag, but we plan 50 to 100 years ahead, is, maybe Sputnik, my take is that the digitization is, it's the fastest growing subsector in water by far because we're catching up to the rest of the world. And it's fine, we're catching up. We're not talking, we're catching up. How do you see that? Because, if you look at things like non-revenue water, is, by digitizing, you can very clearly drive efficiencies, you can drive targeted asset replacement and rejuvenation and pressure management and the likes. Do you see the digitization as a very strong drive? And do you see that we have the resources in South Africa and able to support that drive?
Digitization is one of the issues that are being looked very, very, very keenly upon by the department, by the ministry, particularly because of the issues that you are raising: efficiency, reduced timelines, and all of those things. What we have found is that even though it may not be, completely, or rather not really working optimally all the time, but at least there's a huge amount of that work that has gone off, the physical. When you look at the issue around the water use license applications that are now done electronically and within a shorter time space, you realize that it means that some of these things have always been possible, but because we were kind of closed in and into the old ways of doing things, we've always done things that way, that kind of syndrome. It takes a bit of time to just get people out of the mindset of the fact that we need to be moving elsewhere. But I think one of the things that we realized as well, and maybe it is a bad example to use, but that the COVID-19 experience over the last 2 years has brought into a sharp focus the fact that you can be able to do work without being at your normal desk in an office. And maybe there is even a lot more time that you attach to the work that you have to do when you are not necessarily having to travel to the office and travel back home. And then those are the kind of things that are being looked at. And I think one of the things that is going to assist in a bit of time is that there is now within the top structure of the department a particular DDG that is looking at water services only and working through the whole value chain instead of water services and attached to any other thing that is by the wayside. So though that person is given that responsibility to look at ensuring that it is not just about bringing a tap to a particular place, but it is about ensuring that water actually comes through that tap and not just once. So that in itself, plus the fact that we're looking at how to actually bring the water sector into the 4IR, I think it's going to help us. And well, some of us are on the older side, but the young guys that are coming in, the new engineers and what have you, I think they're going to help us a lot to be able to do that. And probably also the partnerships with the private sector can also assist us, because in the private sector, one would want to believe in the main, a lot of work is actually done online and so on and so forth. So it's a lot of lessons to learn, but we need to actually want to learn those lessons. Thank you.
What are some of the things, Sputnik, that needs to happen, and maybe Anthony, Fred, Benoit, your thoughts on as well. What are some of the things that you see needs to happen for this partnership between the department and private partnerships to move forward? Like, what are some of the things that's holding back that partnership from moving forward? Are there any roadblocks that we need to remove?
You know, when I look at it, I don't think there are, particularly because, you know, there was a very clear direction from Minister to DG to say, let us do this and let us get it done. One of the things that I know from my interaction with both offices is that we've had a difficulty of marrying the diary of the DG and the minister to really have a final sit down on the matter and get it off the table, so that, you know, the DG and the CE of DBSA can then just run with it and be able to do that. But in the meantime, the actual structure and so on of the office, I think that the work to put it together is still ongoing. We should be able, I think, if I'm not mistaken, and I would need to check with that, be able to actually indicate in the very near future as to exactly where we are. What I will do is I will have to talk to the DG's office, because they would have the latest information, and then be able to indicate exactly where things are, because it is an important tool that is going to assist us, but it will also bring confidence, I think, to the private sector participants, who will be able to work with someone like the CE of DBSA in the mix, who understands and who I think that the private sector can be able to be comfortable that there could be you know, a similar type of thinking in terms of how things need to go and how quickly and so on.
Thank you, Sputnik. Anthony, if I can ask you any thoughts from your side on enabling a better way forward?
Yes, I think let's just try and marry this strand of conversation up with what was said earlier on in terms of the policy shift. And the policy shift is now to increasingly embrace the private sector and work with the private sector. Now, you'll find most certainly from the private investment community that there will be a very, very strong demand almost towards the digitization of water, because this brings about greater clarity and accountability. Private capital cannot flow into a bottomless pit. It just doesn't work that way. So when you start looking at the tightening up of let's call it the leaky bucket, then one of those important issues is going to be about the digitization. But when you start going to digitization, it takes you into a whole different space that maybe the average viewer is unaware of. It's not just about understanding, for example, who consumes what amount of water. It's about a whole lot of other things, about the big data that you can now start analyzing, about things like different peak flows, changes in pressure over time, changes in value, different users, which areas are offline, which areas are online, unaccounted for water, all of these things. So they've all got absolute real-time monetary value. And as you see private capital moving into the space, I'm convinced that you're going to start seeing an improvement in the efficiency as well, because you must remember that every drop of water is actually a drop of value. And that value is going to flow through the economy with a multiplier, and that's the intention. So you want to account for every drop of water, and of course, if you get into the really deep down into this thing called digitization, you also start going into blockchain technology, and blockchain now is about accountability, and particularly on contracting side. So when you start talking about contracts and the contract value chain and what have you, and catching people with their fingers in the till, this is the way to go, which is also the very reason why it's going to be resisted, because those people who are feeding at the trough at the moment don't want to lose that position of privilege. So that's one of the areas of pushback. But nonetheless, I think society in general would welcome this. Certainly the owners of capital would welcome it. The people willing to cooperate would certainly welcome it. So this is, without any question, without a way to go in the future. So I congratulate government for thinking along those lines, and certainly I know we in the chamber are more than willing to cooperate in that direction. I've got various points of contact with different ministers as well on this very same matter. So we'll just continue doing that.
Thank you very much, Anthony. Fred, may I bring you into the conversation at this point? I saw you nodding your head at various points there.
You know, I'm sitting here and I'm hearing the colleagues and this discussion, and I'm like, this is just these are some of the things that one is going to miss once one moves out of the sector. Maybe not out of the sector as such, but out of government. By the way, because at the end of November I will not be a civil servant anymore. Because my time will be up, but I'm going to miss these discussions, and everything else. But I'm going to depend on you, Brigitte, that from time to time when there are these discussions happening, if you could just let me know. I'm going to keep my number, just so that I can just even sit and listen. This sector is fascinating. I still get amazed at the amount of information that one can be able to get over and over the days. It's like you've never worked in the sector at all. But whenever you listen to people who know what is happening in the sector, who understand the functioning and so on and so forth, you always wonder. So how much more is there, in the sector? And it continues to be fascinating. Tony and colleagues, I must say, you have assisted me to be able to understand some of the little things that really have helped me to be able to make sense of what it is that is involved in the sector. And I really love it. I just love the water and sanitation sector. But I hope that before the end of November, Brigitte, we know one will be able to listen in on one of your programs and just be able to bid colleagues goodbye for as a civil servant.
We'll definitely have to diarize that, Sputnik, and you're leaving at the wrong time. You're leaving at the most exciting time in the space.
Absolutely. I don't know what my timing was all about. I mean, really now, I could have done better here. But yeah, thank you very much. And colleagues, I've enjoyed working with you guys, and I'm sure I will still enjoy listening to you and understanding what it is that is going to happen. The water chamber, it's got so much work on its plate. I mean, this country will not be able to really go anywhere without the input of the chamber and the members. I can say that to anyone very easily, and yeah. But it's fun. Brigitte, you've been a very good colleague. Don't worry about it.
Thank you, Sputnik. I know that you've got a bit of a time constraint and that you need to run. So I think we're, just from ourselves, a huge big thank you, and we'll certainly diarize that date and make sure that we invite you back before then. So thanks very much, Sputnik. Your time's much appreciated.
Thank you, Brigitte. Thank you, colleagues. Have a good afternoon.
Thank you. Go well. Thanks.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. Brigitte, am I?
Yes. Thanks, Fred.
So I think, just a takeaway from the discussions, I think that there's really there's an understanding that, no one can do this in isolation. There's also an understanding that it's more than just the hard engineering and just having plans. And I think the two important components that we speak about, in addition to the plans, is the financial engineering. Who's going to pay for it? How are you going to pay for it? And how do you create trust so that you can invite private capital into that space? And then how do you deal with your systems engineering and your stakeholder management to deal with all of the other issues that we face? And I think there's now a realization that the delivery of a water project or the addressing of a water problem has got to be seated within these three spheres: the having an engineering plan, but starting off with who's going to pay it, who are the stakeholders, how do we put it together, and how do we engage? And that's where the chamber reaches out to government and to the private sector to say, that's the role that we play in aggregating all the interests and getting people around the table to say, how do we take this forward?
Thanks very much for that. And I understand, Anthony, you need to leave as well. You've also got a time constraint. May I ask you for a final comment on today's conversation?
Yes, thanks, Brigitte. Look, I think what Sputnik said at the end there was really an endorsement of the value of the chamber. This is exactly what we've been trying to do. The purpose of the chamber is to be a solution-oriented body of professional people. It's not about finger pointing. It's not about apportioning blame or any of those things. But it doesn't always mean to say that we agree with everything going on, because we have the right to vent our mind, to call things the way we see them. So I think it's we do have a very good relationship with government. We're seeing this playing out now in Gqeberha, and we're seeing it playing out in other parts of the country as well. So we just got to continue doing what we're going to do. And I think the thing that's alarmed me in the recent past is I've been drawn into some social media engagement over this aquifer storage and recovery program in the Western Cape, and I'm absolutely shocked, to be honest, at the vitriol and the level of suspicion and misunderstanding there. And I think this is an important part for the chamber to start playing as well, just to try and bring about some technical understanding of why this is necessary, why this is safe. But I think ultimately we will always work closely with government, because cooperation, whether we like it or not, cooperation is always the best way forward for society as a whole. So thank you very much, and thanks to my colleagues for always keeping their steady hand at the tiller. I appreciate that.
Thanks very much, Anthony, and thanks for your time. Much appreciated as well. Benoit, so we've got coming up very shortly, I think next month, the IWA World Water Congress, an exhibition in Copenhagen, Denmark. What's the significance of that event?
So that finished, I think, today. So World Water Week was the first week of the month, and then middle of last week to I think yesterday was, and this is where our month has been, was the IWA biennial. And next, I think it's either next month or in November, is the first IWA digital conference. And also I'm proud to announce that we'll be talking at the WISA, so the Water Institute of Southern Africa, introducing the concept of digital water infrastructure. And we're invited by WISA to do this. And one of the important things that comes through digitalization is what Tony was talking about, is to have a central point of truth that is immutable and is shared. And so digitalization, apart from its, let's say, its operational management and strategic capabilities, is also a tool of inculcating trust between public and private sectors. And this is it's not a South African thing. Let's not pat ourselves on the back for that problem. It's a global thing. There's mistrust generally, and in California, it's playing itself very, very hard, as it's done in the Darling Basin in Australia. And what we're seeing is through digitalization, what we're able to do is address the element of trust to a much greater extent. Now, the water use license system was digitized, although it hasn't been fully digitized. So once it's put onto distributed ledger technology, then it becomes not only immutable, but it also becomes trustworthy, because it is open to the, let's say, the network that's connected to that. So you know what you've placed, who placed it, who ticked what box, who crossed what box, and what was done and not done. So immutable, can't be changed, it can be paralleled, redone, and the likes, but we have a digital trail of who's done what. So if there are any sticky fingers, the stickiness cannot be erased, okay? But the idea is that you inculcate transparency. So through digitalization is we can rebuild the trust between the public and private sector. And another important term I learned last week was citizen science, in that it can be a very good thing, but also a very dangerous thing, okay? We've got a lot of amateurs in the professional space. So what we've got to do is harness that, because the citizen science is an important extension of business and of government. And but I saw last week some horrendously dangerous practices, and we'll talk about that, another time. In that we're dealing with, and I got hit by that. Okay, I've been extremely ill, and there's quite a few people were through that. So what I'm saying is, in the citizen science, so let's be active citizens, but let's be very careful, especially when it comes to the sampling of water and sewage. Let's be extremely careful. Okay, I was in intensive care for 10 days 10 years ago because of that. Okay, don't intend doing it again, and I'm fairly immune because I've worked in this in the sector for quite a while. So yeah, overall, I think we've got a very good strategy that's come out. There's a lot of public participation, and I just urge the business sector to send us so that we can next week conclude our comments through to government. And believe it or not, a lot of the language in the National Water Resource Strategy Draft 3 is our language. It's not government's language. It's not the private sector. It's our language. And I think that's an important thing. So we are being heard. So let's be a little bit more optimistic, but let's also, be active and hold everybody to account, the government and the private sector. That's it from my side. Thank you very much.
Well, to me, it sounds like, there's a need all round for responsible participation in this process. Being where we are, I thought maybe a good thought to end off on is, can we just briefly touch on the effects of load shedding on the water sector and why it's important to address this? We can probably speak a bit more in the next episode. We don't have too much time left, but I think if we can just very briefly talk on it because it's so topical.
If I may, so water and energy are intertwined. Everybody talks about food security and all the like. To me, food security is a result of water and energy security. So they are intertwined. We need each one to manage and move the other around. If you take Quebec that was mentioned, it has something like 280 pump stations. How do you synchronize those 280 pump stations to varying levels of load shedding, varying levels of supply and demand of water? And Cape Town is exactly the same. They've got 300 to 400 pump stations. Durban's 270, 280 also. So I'm talking water. Then you've got the sewage, which is more or less the same number. And you've got, I think, 8,000 kilometers to 6,000 kilometers in a metro, in the large metros of pipe work, of conveyance work. Now, you've got zero chance if you don't digitize this. Okay, AI can do 8,000 to 20,000 decisions a second. You cannot synchronize what is an absolutely problematic collapse of our basic services. You cannot synchronize them manually. You can't do that. No control room can ever try to do that. So one of the big things that we're busy with in our commercial activities, Fred and myself and a few other guys, is actually synchronizing exactly that, because we've got digital products that were developed to shave off the energy demand. It came out of the energy utility sector to shave off the energy demand and save costs. But in actual fact, that digital solution is 100% suited for South Africa, because we're the only country who's not at war that has load shedding and continuous load shedding, and it's unpredictable load shedding. So we've got the solutions and the likes. And what's nice is most of the pump stations, the metros at least, have got telemetry. So they are connected one way or another. Like us humans, there's more cell phones around, and I don't want to go to that Bluetooth tap. There's more cell phones around than there are taps around in our country. So the pump stations, there's a lot of them. They are connected and the likes. So I think over the next, load shedding is here to stay. So, in the short to medium term, but there are ways of using the fourth industrial revolution, of mitigating the difficulties of managing our system. Because the reality is parts of Joburg have collapsed. They just don't have water, and we've got sewage everywhere, purely because by the time you manage to switch your systems on, they've tripped and all the likes, they overflow, and then load shedding kicks in again. Okay, my UPS is not recharging in time at the moment also. So, but there is technology to do that. It's fairly quick. So yes, we're entering the digital era. And the nice thing is it's actually fairly well serviced from OEMs to boutique suppliers and all the like. So it's not the last time we're hearing about digitalization of the water value chain. There's a lot out there, and it also helps us to connect the dots.
Awesome. Thanks, Benoit. Fred, a final comment from you before we close?
Yeah, I think a couple of things. It can't be business as usual. It just can't be. We're facing increased complexity, increased problems that impact, and you get into a cycle. If you don't have water, if you don't have power, you can't create jobs. If you can't create jobs, it just replicates this problem. The second thing is there's an incredible urgency to act, and I think that was the key question to DWS is wonderful plans. We're hugely supportive. When can we get involved in the action? We need to create an environment where we can build trust between the stakeholders, because that's been broken down systematically over time, and we need to engage on that to provide efficient and effective execution within a socially responsible framework, and that really is for me where we are and where we need to focus our attention and engage and really say, what can we do tomorrow? Where do we start? How do we reach out? How do we engage with government? How do we engage with the private sector and take the problem and turn it into an opportunity? Because the major problem we have in this country is probably also our single biggest opportunity for economic rejuvenation. And when we start seeing that opportunity, then all of a sudden the actions will move us forward.
Thanks very much. Appreciate that. Benoit, any closing comments before we say goodbye to our audience today?
I'm really appreciative of government being, quite forthright and accommodating. I think it's quite good, and I think let's keep the dialogue going. And as Tony has said, there's a lot of trust issues we need to look at. I know through social media we're working on quite a lot of that. During the pandemic, we had a lot of the fake news in the water sector. We had it before from day zero in Cape Town. We've got now. We need to plug away, because common sense does always win. And I think what would we do? Well, I suppose fake information wouldn't flow as freely if you didn't have social media, but it counters it so well. So let's use the tools we have. They are digital. Our digital twins work, and let's make this country work for us.
Absolutely. Thanks very much to our audience today. And if you're catching the show on the replay, thanks for watching the replay. So from BeLive Media and the South African Water Chamber, with huge thanks to the Department of Water and Sanitation for being a guest on the show today, Sputnik Ratal. So take care, everyone. We'll see you back on the next episode of the Water Hour.